I'm going to show you how to rebuild a front mount oil pump so we can save a little bit of cashola. And we're gonna do this for the first time together. Let's do it. Welcome back if you're new to the channel. I'm John Wick. My name is Matt. I'm going to rebuild the front mount oil pump for my Chevy Cruze 1.8 liter. A lot of these oil pumps, it's the same concept. However, this is the first time I'm doing it for myself, but it's a pretty simple process. So let's dive into it. All right, boys and girls, we have our front mount oil pump. I have it completely disassembled. I am going to show you how this thing will go back together. I didn't really feel like you guys needed to see how this thing came apart, because it will come apart the same way it goes together, but I did need to make sure I had all the parts necessary in order to rebuild this thing. Here is the oil pump housing. It has about 125,000 miles on it. It's in really good condition aside from it's just dirty. It has carbon buildup. Aside from that, all the parts are in good shape, but there are some rebuild parts that I did get for this in order to refreshen it. Here are the gears that actually pump the oil. They seem to be in okay shape, but I went ahead and got a new set. This was $25. One of the main reasons I'm doing this is because I wanted to replace the front main seal. And in order to do so, I just needed to disassemble this thing, so why not rebuild it rather than buying a whole new unit for about 150 bucks. Rather, I've spent about $60, $70 at the most between all the replacement parts and the supplies here. So we've got our seal. This was maybe $5. And I'll leave a link down in the description to where I got all these parts. We have our spring for our oil pressure relief, but these essentially are the springs that allow the oil to bypass if the pressure gets too high, when it gets too high, more or less. This did come in a 5-pack, even though I only need one. And then we have another spring here, and I'll show you where all these parts go. Aside from that, that is about it. There is a plug that I did have to get because I could not find, for the life of me, this copper seal here. And here's our old plug that came out. And I just want to make sure this thing seals up because this plug goes right here on the outside of the engine. And there is a little oil pressure check valve right in there. As you can see, I didn't feel the need to remove that because it's probably a pain in the ass to get that out. So we're just going to leave it as is. Clean this up. I got a little bit of all-purpose grease. This is good for GM vehicles. A couple cans of brake clean, some shop towels. This came free, little hand cleaner that always comes in handy. We got some shop towels, some plastic wrap to wrap this thing all up once it is finished. I got some red and blue Loctite in order to keep some of these things from backing out, and a pack of gum because I needed to meet the $20 credit at AutoZone. We do have our seal here for the oil pump itself. This is needed, however, we're not going to use it right this second in this video. We shall use this in a future video once we go to reassemble the entire engine. And here's some of the assorted tools that I'm using. We have our trusty 13mm socket and a wrench. We have a torque wrench, so that way we can torque these things down, make sure they're all equally torqued. Even though I don't have the specs to this, I'm just gonna kind of fill it out and torque everything down equally. We got a straight edge and some filler gauges, so that way we can kind of measure the clearance between the pump gears once we put the new gears in to the housing, and a plate that just retains the entire gear assembly that pushes the oil through the entire system. And these are just for show, and I'll probably chew on that later after I leave here after having a beer. And I'm sure there's some other things I will use throughout this video, and I'll walk you through why it is I'm doing certain things and what I will use that's not sitting on this table in order to clean this thing up. So first things first, let's clean this up. I'm gonna use a little bit of compressed air just to blow off the bulk of all the dirt that's sitting on this thing. Because again, this is an oil pump that came off an engine with 120,000 plus miles. Let's go ahead and get this front seal off, and then we'll proceed with cleaning this thing up. Take that for your organized thumbnail. Gloves are for wusses and organized crime scenes. The first thing we need to do is get rid of this front seal. You do have to be careful not to mar up this inside portion here. It kind of looks like it might be a bearing race that rides on the crankshaft. I do not want to score that up or ruin the surface in which the seal sits down in. Otherwise, we'll just have more problems. So I'm just going to take this screwdriver here and kind of grab the outer lip, and we'll just pry this bad boy up. Bada bing, bada boom, it's out. Yeah, if only it were that easy. I might break the damn screwdriver. Yeah. Way to go, YouTube. You make this look so much easier. I'm gonna get something that has a little bit more leverage. Can't ever seem to find what I need when I need it, but let's give this a try. I'm just gonna be careful not to damage anything. Bada bing, bada boom. Awesome, we didn't scratch anything up. Pulled right out, took, as you can see, quite a bit of force. Okay, let's clean this thing up. So first thing I'm going to do is blow this thing, hit it with some compressed air so that way we can get rid of any excess dirt, and then we'll take it over to, it's a washout booth for screen printing, but I'm going to use it as a way to clean this. Ugh. I'm going to use some extreme simple green aircraft cleaner. That's good for cleaning aluminum parts. It's not as corrosive as the original formula, but what's in here is water, and we're going to pour some of this in here, let it reduce down, and we're going to go to town on it. Let it work its magic. Now that that's set for a moment, I'm just going to use a little green Scotch-Brite to kind of clean her up. Now that we've kind of knocked off a lot of the just kind of loose stuff, I'm going to power wash the crap out of this, and then I'm going to keep repeating the process until this thing is clean enough. Alright, I've got this thing about as clean as it's going to get with that process. So now we're going to hit it with a little bit of compressed air and then some brake cleaner. Alright, as you can see, it got it pretty clean with a little bit of brake cleaner. Our previous process of using some Scotch-Brite and the simple green and the compressed air after spraying some brake cleaner on it, it helped break loose a lot of that dust. Next thing I'm going to do to kind of clean this up just a little more is I still have some Kim dip, so I think I'm going to Bob Ross this thing and just brush it on some of these stubborn areas, and it should be looking pretty close to new. So I'm going to toss some of these dirty parts inside the bucket of Kim dip, and then I'm going to Bob Ross it. And we're going to paint some trees. Take that. This thing's been sitting for about a good 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to take it over and rinse this thing off. And back to some compressed air. We'll use a little bit more brake cleaner. I think we're finished. This thing is about as clean as it's going to get, even though it's a little discolored from the oil, but it is clean. And we got rid of our carbon. And we'll take our parts out of the bucket here. And we'll give these a rinse too. Looking pretty good. Alright, now that everything's as clean as a whistle, it's time for the fun part. We're going to start assembling this thing. So we've got our springs in which we really only need a couple of these. And by the way, this cardboard box is a new cardboard box, newish, but I blew it off with the with some compressed air, so I think we're good there. We only need one of these springs, so hit me up if you need one of these. If you want to pay shipping, you know, a couple bucks for one of these, I'd be happy to send you one. We got our seal, and then we have our plug for our oil valve check Dumagopper. And last but not least, we have our new set of gears here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap in this new seal, and this side goes facing in. In a nutshell, how these things work: you got this lip right here, you got this spring that pulls that seal down onto that crankshaft, the nose of the crankshaft, and the pressure from the inside of the engine as well will blow this or push it and make it tight on the nose of the crankshaft, the end. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to drop it in place, and I saw on a video someone used some spit. That's what they recommended. But it doesn't look like GM or Holden or the fine folks from Daewoo in Korea use any sealer. We'll see if we can press it down. Doesn't look like we can. So I'm just going to use a socket that's about as big as this seal. I'm just going to tap it in. And if it starts to get sideways like that, you can just start hitting on this side over here. It's a tight fit. And we just want to make sure this thing is seated all the way down in there. Now that we have that seated, I'm just going to turn this thing over, and we are going to mock up the new oil pump gears. This only goes in there one way. So if you take a look, there's this beveled edge, and then there's this somewhat of a circle that's kind of cut into it. This beveled edge is going to go facing down onto this lip right here. We've got this beveled edge, and we've got this lip right here. This is going to sit down right on there. If you try turning it the other way, it doesn't want to seat. And just in case you're wondering how this thing works, this fits over the crankshaft. This gear sits down inside here. We got our beveled edge that goes in there. That holds it securely in place, along with it riding on the nose of the crankshaft. It essentially just kind of compresses that oil and pushes it through these passages here. We do have some pressure relief springs. This just helps regulate the oil pressure. And then our little check valve in here. You know, if you're more familiar with it and you want to explain it a little bit better, leave a comment down below. But something you have to keep an eye out for with this particular gear here, it does have a little bit of a bevel here. Right here it's just flat. And this thing, the bevel edge will go down inside this pump like so. So that way this flat surface right here is riding against this plate. In which you can see that even for 100 and close to 130,000 miles, there's very little wear, so we're good to go. I'm just doing this as a precaution because I'm putting some expensive parts in this thing, and you know, for 50 bucks to rebuild this, why not? Alright, now that we got some of that fun jazz out of the way, we're going to toss this inside, and then what we're going to do, this really hasn't been explained or done before, but a general rule of thumb is you don't want any more than 3/1000. So it looks like our 2 is a little on the loose side, and then 3 is kind of hitting the flat edge. I'm just checking the clearance because you need a little bit of clearance in between the gears and the plate that just holds the whole assembly together. But I mean, we're probably maybe closer to the 2. Hell, I don't even think that thing can squeeze in there. So it's probably a little under 2. I don't really have a great way of checking this. Obviously, if you had a lot more than that, you would have an issue, but we're able to somewhat get this 2 under there. Might be closer to the 15 thousandths. So I think we're A-okay. I'm not a pro at this, but yeah, I think we'll be fine. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna take this gear set out. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take some, and I'll leave links down in the description to all the stuff I'm using. I'm going to take some multi-vehicle high temperature grease. And this is for GM vehicles. I'm just going to take a little bit of this. And what this is going to help with is essentially priming the oil system, because this is going to create a little bit of suction, if you will. It's going to create some suction, and this stuff will reduce down as it heats up and just become part of the oil. Anytime you're doing a new engine, you're going to have to do your initial run-in oil, then change it, and it's all going to vary from engine to engine, especially if you have some flat tappet camshafts. So I'm going to toss some of this in there. We're going to set this inside there, and from my understanding, we need to pack this like some bearings. So we'll toss a little bit in here as well. A little bit. We'll toss a lot in there. So really this is to help it from running dry again, and to help it just kind of get everything primed up, create some suction there. So let's toss a little more, because I kind of want it to push out a little bit. There we go. We want it to ooze out. And a little trick, as I flip this thing over, I'm going to put a little on the surface here again, so this thing's not running dry. There we go. Now we're going to take our plate. We'll put a little bit here as well in these valleys, in which what feeds the oil. We'll put a little there, and we're just going to pop this thing into place. It's only going to go on one way. There we go. Toss a little on the back of this so it doesn't rust up as it sits while we're waiting on our engine rebuild. All right, there we have it. And I'm just going to get rid of a little bit of the excess, and we're going to put a little on the seal as well, and that will help extend the life, because it's not, you're not starting out with a dry run. So I've got a T30 socket here, and we're going to take all of our screws over here. So I'm going to use my blowout gun. What's in here is some fluid that's basically equivalent to acetone, except you can punch a hole in your finger with this. And we'll hit these holes as well. Make sure we get all that grease out. We'll let this flash off for a second, and then we'll come back and put some red Loctite on them. So that way we got peace of mind. We don't have to worry about it. Alright, now that everything's evaporated, use a little bit of red Loctite, and we'll just snug these things down. That should help. And I'm just going to do this quickly, because this stuff tends to harden pretty quick. And we'll go back and we'll just kind of torque them. I think I might go to, we'll go back to about 7. I think that should get us where we need to be. Alright, I think we're good. What I ended up with is about 10 foot-pounds. Alright, I'm happy with that. I'll wipe off some of this excess grease. I just wanted a little bit of a light coating there. Again, just to keep this thing from rusting. And later when we go to install this, we'll degrease the areas where our new gasket's going to be up. But before I get too far and forget, I'll take some of this excess grease here. And we're just going to clean that up a little bit, but we're also going to use a little bit on the seal here, just so we don't have a dry run. And alright, on to the next part, in which we are going to go ahead and install these plugs and these valves here. Way to go, Matt. And these springs. So the first order of business, I think we'll just go ahead and install this guy. We've got this compression ring here. Golly. So I'm going to install that. This one was the hardest one to remove. You probably could get away with not removing it, but I wanted to, just to make sure while I was cleaning this thing that all the oil passages were completely clean. So I would recommend removing that one. We're going to take our T45 here, and this is going to take quite a bit of force to really compress this. But again, we don't want to strip this thing out, press the shit out of it. I'd rather it be a little loose and it needing to be snugged up after the fact. A little bit of an oil leak isn't a big deal, but if you overdo it and it strips out, obviously you're not going to be able to retain your oil pressure whatsoever. And I'm just kind of going by feel on this one. I'm going to go back and check where we're at torque wise. Foot-pounds, that is. Newton meters. This isn't a Newton meter. So we're right at about 40 foot-pounds before, maybe a little under, maybe 38 before this thing started budging again. So I'm going to leave it there. Next, we're going to take our pistons here, or our valves, and these things are only going to go together one way. As you can see, these are a little bit bigger. Let's see what we got here. This one is a little smaller. That one goes in there. That dude will fit in there nicely. You can see that there's a lot more slack here. This one fits in there nicely. This one will not fit, so there's only really one way to do this. This will go in there as well, and this guy will go up into, it'll go up into this bore here. But before I slide that in, I'm going to take a little bit of assembly lube, and I'm just going to lube this guy up, so that way we're not just running it in there dry. We'll put it just a little more, because some of this is going to wipe off as we run it in there, as we run it in the hole. And I don't recall this having, again, one of these looked like it had a little bit of thread locker. This one for sure, but for safety's sake, let's use the touch so they don't back out. Why not? Because we can't really find anything service wise. We'll just put a little drop on there, and we'll run it up into this bore here. And I'm going to take my 13mm here. It's going to drive it on home until this thing bottoms out. And we're going to snug it up. We'll see what that comes out to foot-pound wise before we can get it to turn some more. And we're at about 41, 42. That's not going anywhere. And now we're going to repeat the process for this last little piston, valve, whatever you want to call it. Just putting a little lube down. We'll run that up in the bore. Make sure everything just goes in there nice and smooth. And we'll take a little bit of red Loctite, toss it on there. And in this case, we'll need the T45 for this one. And drive it on home. Alright, we're bottoming out. Just gonna snug it up, wipe off some of the excess, and we'll see where we're at torque wise before we can get it to move just a hair. So we're right at about 25 foot-pounds there. And there we have it. All finished. Look at that, and we saved ourselves some money too. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some plastic wrap, and I'm going to wrap this guy up just to make sure we don't get any dust on it. Just want to keep this thing nice and clean and fresh. Thanks for tuning in. I know this probably isn't near as cool as some of the turbo stuff and all that, but this is in preparation so we can go ahead and start putting our engine together once all of our parts are ready. If you're new to the channel, I'm Matt. Give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Until next time, peace out with your peace out.